There is a strange and stubborn illusion that follows human beings through every era, every civilization, every quiet season of an ordinary life. The illusion is this, that somewhere, just ahead of where you are standing right now, in some room not yet entered, in some possession not yet held, in some version of yourself not yet achieved, there lives a more complete, more satisfied, more finely addressed version of you. And the entire structure of modern life, with its advertisements and aspirations and endless scrolling feeds, has been built like an elaborate cathedral around the worship of that illusion. We are taught in 1,000 subtle and not so subtle ways to believe that what we have is the rough draft, and what we want is the finished poem. But here is what the old teachers noticed, centuries before the first advertisement was ever written. They noticed that the people who arrived at the monastery gate with nothing, no silks, no titles, no plans, often sat in the garden with a quality of stillness that the wealthy pilgrims, who arrived clutching their prayers like shopping lists, could not seem to find. The monks called this quality santosha in one tradition, and in the quiet lineage of Zen, they simply called it arriving, not arriving somewhere, just arriving. Fully, completely, in this breath, in this cup of morning tea, in this ordinary and irreplaceable moment. This video is not going to tell you to want less. That kind of instruction, however well-meaning, has always missed the point entirely. This is about something more precise, more honest, and more difficult, learning to actually see what is already here before the mind rushes past it toward what isn't. There was a scholar who came to study with a master near the foothills of a quiet mountain province. The scholar was accomplished by every visible measure. He had read widely, argued brilliantly, accumulated letters of praise from several distinguished teachers, and owned a very fine inkstone which he carried everywhere as a kind of private trophy. He arrived at the master's simple dwelling and announced himself with great confidence, explaining all that he knew and all that he had achieved, and then asked the master to teach him the secret of inner peace. The master listened with the calm, unhurried attention of someone watching clouds pass. Then he invited the scholar inside and began to prepare tea. He placed the ceramic bowl in front of the scholar and began to pour. The tea filled the bowl to the rim, and then the master kept pouring. The tea spilled over the edge, ran across the wooden table, and dripped quietly onto the floor. The scholar jumped back, startled. "Stop, it's over, fool. It can't hold any more." The master set down the pot and looked at the scholar with genuine gentleness. "You are like this cup," he said. "How can anything new enter if you are already full?" This story has been told and retold, not because it contains a clever trick, but because it diagnoses something precise about the human condition. The mind that is perpetually full of wanting, of comparing, calculating, accumulating, planning the next acquisition, has no remaining space to rest in what it already holds. This is not a metaphor, it is closer to physics. Attention is finite. Every moment spent calculating what is missing is a moment in which what is present goes unseen, unfelt, untasted. The fig sits on the table, perfect in its small, sweet ripeness, and the mind that is busy composing a wish list has already turned away from it. The Buddha, sitting beneath his tree on the banks of the Naranyara River, did not reach enlightenment by acquiring something. He reached it by setting down, by becoming, for one long and luminous night, completely still in the presence of what was already there. Every spiritual tradition in human history, from the Desert Fathers to the Taoist sages to the quiet Christian mystics, has arrived at some version of the same recognition, that the nourishment we have been searching for was never located in the next destination. It was located in the quality of attention we brought to where we already were. Most of us do not fail to find contentment because we are careless or shallow. We fail because we have been handed 3 deeply embedded myths about the nature of satisfaction, and we have carried them for so long that they feel like facts. These myths deserve to be looked at directly. The way you might hold a worn stone up to the light to finally understand what it truly is. The first myth is that contentment is a reward, that it is something you earn by finishing, by completing the project, clearing the debt, reaching the number, losing the weight, finding the relationship. Under this myth, contentment is always positioned at the end of a conditional sentence. When I have this, then I will feel at peace. The difficulty with this myth is not that the goals are wrong. Goals, skillfully held, can be beautiful expressions of a human life. The difficulty is in the word, because the mind that requires conditions to be met before it allows itself to rest, will always, without exception, produce new conditions the moment the old ones are fulfilled. This is not pessimism. It is simply the honest observation of how the conditioned mind operates. The finish line moves. It has always moved. And the runner who does not understand this will spend an entire life in exhausted pursuit of a horizon that retreats with every step. The second myth is that contentment means giving up. That to stop reaching and striving and wanting more is somehow a form of defeat. A settling, a small and gray resignation from the adventure of being alive. This myth is particularly powerful in cultures that celebrate ambition and restlessness as virtues. But the monks who lived most fully, who laughed most easily, who created the most enduring art, they were not passive people. They rose before dawn. They tended their gardens with extraordinary care. They held their craft to a standard of almost impossible precision. Contentment did not make them passive. It made them present. And presence, it turns out, is not the enemy of great effort. It is the very ground from which great effort grows. The third myth, perhaps the subtlest and most corrosive of all, is that contentment is a feeling. Something that either arrives on its own or doesn't. Something that depends on external circumstance aligning correctly before it can be felt. Under this myth, contentment is an emotion that happens to you. But the old teachers consistently pointed in a different direction. They described contentment not as a feeling that visits you, but as a capacity you cultivate, a muscle, not a mood, a practice, not a prize. The scholar who arrives with his fine inkstone and his crowded mind is not waiting for the right circumstances to feel at peace. He is carrying the very conditions of his unrest inside himself. And those conditions will follow him to every monastery, every mountain, every quiet garden he ever visits, until the day he finally sets the cup down and lets it empty. So how does a person actually practice this? Not as an idea, not as a concept to admire from a comfortable distance, but as a living, breathing, daily discipline woven into the texture of an ordinary life. The scholar asked this question too, on his third morning at the monastery, after a night of lying awake, realizing how overfull his cup truly was. The master, by now very fond of the young man's earnestness, answered him in a way that surprised him. You will start, the master said, by simply noticing what you already have, not by counting it, and not by being grateful in a performative way that quickly becomes another task on a list. You will start by actually touching it with your attention, the weight of your tea bowl in your hands, the sound the sandals make on the wet stone path, the precise shade of light that falls through your window at this hour of this morning and will never fall in exactly this way again. The scholar wrote nothing down. For once, he simply listened, and something that had been moving very fast inside his chest began, without effort, to slow. This practice, often called, in its various forms, bare attention, or simply coming to your senses, is deceptively simple and genuinely difficult. It is difficult because the conditioned mind, trained by years of forward motion and comparison and planning, finds stillness uncomfortable at first. The moment you stop feeding the wanting machine, it protests. It generates urgency. It whispers that you are falling behind, that others are moving ahead, that this pause is dangerous. Learning to hear that whisper clearly, without either obeying it or fighting it, is the central work of contentment practice. You simply observe the restlessness, the way you might watch a stream moving past. You do not step into it, you do not dam it, you simply sit on the bank and notice it moving, and in that noticing, a small, clean distance opens between you and the craving, and in that distance there is quiet. The second thread of practice is learning to lower what the teachers sometimes called the comparison mind. Much of our dissatisfaction with what we have is not native to the thing itself. It arrives the moment we hold it up against something else. The house is fine until you see the neighbor's renovation. The meal is satisfying until someone describes their dinner at a celebrated restaurant. The career is meaningful until a school friend's promotion appears on a glowing screen. Comparison is not inherently evil. It is a natural function of a categorizing mind, but used unconsciously and constantly, it functions like a slow leak in a water vessel. Everything good you hold gradually drains away through the small hole of "but what about theirs?" The practice is not to pretend you have no opinions about beauty or quality or aspiration. It is to catch the comparison arising, name it quietly, "Ah, there it is again," and return, with patient kindness, to what is directly in front of you. The third thread is perhaps the most tender. It is the practice of speaking kindly to yourself about what your life already is. Most people who hunger for contentment are simultaneously running a quiet internal commentary that is remarkably unkind, a voice that catalogues shortcomings, rehearses regrets, and holds the current moment up against an imagined ideal and finds it wanting. This voice is not your wisdom. It is not even, in most cases, truly you. It is a habit of mind, inherited and reinforced, and like all habits, it can be, gently, consistently, compassionately, redirected, not by arguing with it, argument feeds it, but by offering, in place of its criticism, a single breath of recognition. This is what I have, and it is, in this moment, enough. On the final morning before the scholar was to leave the mountain and return to his life of letters and ink and appointments, he rose before the master, before the birds even, and went out to the garden. He sat on the low stone wall and looked at the valley below, in the darkness, where a few small lights were beginning to blink awake in distant farmhouses. He had no particular thought. He was simply there, breathing, watching the dark world begin its slow and ancient practice of becoming light again. The master found him there an hour later and sat beside him without speaking. They watched the sunrise together, two human beings on a stone wall, held by the morning. After a long silence, the scholar turned to the master and said something that surprised them both. He said, "I have been here for 4 days, and I think I have finally understood what you are teaching. It is not that I should stop wanting. It is that I should stop leaving." The master looked at him with quiet warmth. "Yes," he said. "You keep leaving to find the life you imagine is waiting somewhere ahead. But the life you are looking for has been here the whole time, waiting patiently for you to come back to it." The scholar picked up a single fallen leaf from the stone wall beside him. It was dry and brown and completely ordinary. He held it for a moment, feeling its papery weight, tracing the veins with his thumb. Then he placed it very carefully in the pocket of his robe and carried it all the way home, not as a souvenir, not as a symbol, but simply as a reminder that this was real, that this had been enough, that the whole long search had been, in the end, a circle, and the center of that circle was right here, in the plain and luminous ordinary, waiting for him to finally stop running past it. Contentment is not a mountain you summit once and then live on forever. It is a practice you return to, breath by breath, morning by morning, like a monk returning to the same simple courtyard, with the same simple broom, not because the stones are always dirty, but because the returning itself is the whole point. Every time you choose, in a single conscious moment, to feel the weight of what you actually hold, rather than reaching blindly for what you imagine is missing, you are practicing the oldest and most radical act of spiritual courage there is. You are saying, with your full attention, this moment, this breath, this ordinary and irreplaceable life, it is enough. It is more than enough. It is, in fact, everything. May you find in this breath what you have been searching for in the next one. May the life you already have reveal itself to you as the gift it has always been. May you return, gently, again and again, to the only home that has never asked you to be more than you already are.